Hello and welcome to Festival Place Climate Resilience to this session with Jonathan Smales, CEO of Human Nature. My name is Christine Murray. I'm director of the Festival Place and editor-in-chief of The Developer, and it gives my pleasure to welcome you to this event, the purpose of which is to come together and to learn and be inspired by those doing and researching, not just talking about climate resilience as we both try to prevent and face up to the place-based risks of climate change. We'll be hearing from those over the next 2 days, taking pragmatic action from reuse to retrofit, from low carbon construction to biodiversity. Thanks to Civic, who are supporting this event. You may have previously known them as Civic Engineers. They have changed their name to reflect the services they offer beyond engineering, and long supporters of this event. We are grateful to them and to our members who support our independent organization to produce brave and enlightening events and journalism. So we have an amazing schedule coming up. I don't want you to miss anything that you want to see. So it's all available and recorded to watch back as soon as the sessions are not live. But if you want to see what's in the schedule and you would like to equally watch back, it's all available via the schedule button. The schedule button is top right on your screen. So you can see all of the sessions in there. And then equally, when the event is not live, you can watch videos of finished talks that will stay open after the event. You can use the chat to share your comments. Please say hello. There's also a Q&A tab for your questions, and of course, emojis, which you've seen already, to share your reactions during the talks. It really does help to bring connection to our speakers, to let you know you're out there and clapping or smiling. The Q&A is a great way for you to shape your learning and further your understanding. We will be taking questions at the end of the talk. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Jonathan Smales is founder and CEO of Human Nature. He has worked in sustainable development for over 30 years and is a recognized leader in sustainable design and urbanism. While MD of Greenpeace, he bought and oversaw the refurbishment of an old animal testing laboratory in Islington. And in 1990, he created and became CEO of the Earth Center National Millennium Project, commissioning some of the world's finest architects, designers, artists, and engineers to create a living showcase for sustainability and best practice. In 2001, he co-founded the Beyond Green Group, which he chaired until 2015, and now he is leading up the campaigning developer Human Nature, who is developing the Phoenix in Lewis, a sustainable neighborhood on a post-industrial site. So Jonathan, please come to the stage, and welcome. Applause from the audience, please.
Thank you very much, Christine. Oh, I can see the applause. That's clever.
I know. It really does help, doesn't it?
I think that was pre-recorded and you're just running it through something. Look, great to be here, and a fantastic event hosted by a fantastic organization. I'm really thrilled to have the opportunity to speak to you. I do quite a lot of these kinds of things, and it may be that many here have heard me speak before, but I'm going to try and really tune this to now, to the politics of today to a certain extent, the context of new towns, of 1.5 million homes or not. What are those homes? What are the places that they're a part of? How do they relate to climate mitigation, climate resilience? Is it just housing, or is it something else? How do we move forward? So, Christine, I think have you got control of the slides, or have I?
They're coming to join you now. And I really look forward to your talk and to chatting to you about it. Those are issues that we're all asking, and those are all questions that we're asking right now. So it's really great to hear you dig into the discussion. I'll leave it to you, and I'll be back for the Q&A. But thanks for being here, Jonathan.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. So, well, there's a bold statement. There is a far, far better world. But if there is one, it needs to be seen to be believed. We're in an era where people are understandably skeptical about what this future with a safer climate might be, whether we really want to aspire to it, and what it will be like. What do we need to do to get there? So first, just a reminder, because we all think we know this and we think we work with it, But I'm not sure that you would know if you look at practice, if you look at how planning works, how development works, how investment works, the everyday experience of working in the system of bringing forward development. I would suggest to you that we're in an existential crisis. What's at stake is nothing less than everything. We're heading towards, on official projections now, 2.7 degrees of heating. Nature is going through an episode of what biologists call the sixth great extinction, 1,000 times faster than the natural background loss of species. And at the same time, poverty, inequality, and social divisions are growing. Particularly the kind of culture wars, the political raging debates about what kind of world we want, how we, what kind of politics we need, what the key issues of the day are. So I want to talk about a few themes that relate to this agenda before coming to some specific propositions about certainly what human nature is doing, trying to do with various placemaking projects. And the biggest proposition for all for me is around this question: how shall we live? How should we live? What is a sustainable lifestyle? What is a sustainable community? A sustainable economy? And how do we design the houses of the future and retrofit existing stock and places, neighborhoods, streets, green spaces, our farming systems, in order that we can live in a sustainable and healthy way? And that's not a bourgeois elitist conceit, but something that can apply to everyone so that everyone is enabled to make good choices. What's the role of placemaking in regard to that question? So one of our themes in human nature is this sense of positivity in the agenda, that sustainability, which is easy to write off in a way as being a world where we live in a cave with a TV switched off. It's all about giving things up, self-sacrifice, which is very difficult to sell, even if it were a right way of thinking. We see sustainability as a series of great opportunities to improve the way we live, to improve our everyday experience of places, our lives, and so on. I'm just going to move to the next slide. Trying to move to the next slide. Here we are. And this is Aldo Civic with his students in Milan with a workshop on rethinking happiness. What is it that enables us to be happier? What kind of lifestyles are involved in that? And we're really mindful of the raw power of sustainable places, the way that making sustainability relatable, these multiple human touch points of designing people's houses, the buildings they look at as they move down the street, the way that in a whole place you're addressing pretty much everything, how we move around, what we see when we open our front door, who we meet. Are we disabling sustainable behaviors, or are we inspiring and enabling them? Can your child play on the street, or is it dangerous? Can the old man cross the road safely? Is the air safe to breathe? So when we're making places, the opportunity to create heat and power networks with renewable energy, active travel, walkability, just the quality of people's everyday experience. These are incredibly powerful tools that we have at our disposal. And of course, Churchill said, rather famously, we shape our buildings and afterwards our buildings shape us. And I wonder how much more true that is of whole places and neighborhoods rather than just buildings. And so if you want to change the way we live, it's not just about intrinsically sustainable built fabric and infrastructures, but how do we organize our land uses and activities and corners and ground floor uses and transport systems to allow us to live, invite us to live in a better way. One of my heroes is Wendell Berry, the great American poet and essayist, and his commitment to belonging, to place, to where we're from, and how it anchors and centers us as people. And one of the things about places is that we all live in a place and it may be an exciting and accessible and beautiful place, or less so. But we have to speak to people and work with people where they really are in their lives today. And so this whole commitment to engaging at the local level, at neighborhood level, is really critical in this agenda. And actually, pleasure, sustainability has to be pleasure, or we won't choose it. How do you create desire in these houses that we're building, in these places that we're making? We mustn't forget that as a key challenge. And I used to be, as Christine said in the introduction, managing director of Greenpeace. One of the things that you learn in Greenpeace is that hope doesn't exist in its own right. Hope is created by action. And so this far, far better future, if it really exists, we do need to show it, to demonstrate it. We need to show what we mean by this new generation of sustainable places, so that we can win this big global agenda while making people's lives far better on an everyday basis. And so we wrote a piece called How Shall We Live? It was aimed at the Newtown Commission and at government for large new settlements. And we suggested these as missions for place, which are very different to what you would normally see in a planning document. But I think that they help us to think in a different way, to see the power of place through a new lens, and indeed our responsibility and accountability as people that try to make place. So for instance, it's not just BNG, but we need to be transforming natural capital to address that biodiversity crisis and improve lives. We need a step change in public and individual health. We need to be thinking about food security, where our food comes from in the cafes and restaurants and food box schemes of our new places. We should be looking at the cost of living, not just the cost of housing. We call that radical affordability, and so on. So this is a different framing for thinking about how we conceive of places. Our brand in Human Nature is based across 5 different typologies of place: rural housing, infill, new life neighborhoods, new settlements and urban extensions, and work that we're doing looking at across Scotland of different types of places. And in terms of what we're saying to our future customers about why live in a human nature place, is that we're obsessed with abundant greenery. If you're going a bit denser, you want a place to be softened and have colour and the vivacity of natural life there. I guess we are unhealthily committed to Scandinavian communitarian values and ideas about sharing and a community being and coming together, and how that manifests in urbanism. Long life, adaptable, natural buildings built from bio-based materials. Here's an odd one: complexity. That the way we make places today, we take out the interest, we design it out, we value engineer it out. We need that close-grained mix of uses and activities and texture and buildings, and so on. And I guess these slides could be made available to anyone interested. So forgive me for not speaking about everything that's on every slide. So when we think of, I mentioned radical affordability a few minutes ago, and here we've got our perspective on this. So the cost of capital that we use. So if you're dealing with 15 to 20% internal rate of return for capital, that's extremely expensive money for building places. So we have to look at that. We have to look at the cost of energy, the cost of transport. So the average spend on a car, if you have to own a car, is £3,500 a year. How much of that can you save if we design walkable neighborhoods that are accessible for public transport that can work efficiently, or for walking or cycling or co-mobility services. We have to attack the cost of building. We do have to system build, particularly if we're going to use bio-based materials. We've got to be incredibly efficient in our procurement and in the way that we design. And we've got to be looking at the cost of mortgages and stamp duty. And if you put all these things together, that's how we address access to housing for the mass of people, many of whom are completely excluded from the housing market. Talk about complexity. These are our 12 levers of transformational change. Everything from stewardship and services, enterprise and creativity, bioregion and ecosystems. What we say is that if you really want to create a sustainable place, you need to be looking at each of these 12 areas for levers of change. And if you can pull the levers in each of them in the way that you design your place and then manage and run your place, then we're going to make a profound shift in environmental and social impact, and indeed in a more productive, sustainable and circular economy, in our view. And so when we look at social impact, there are 20 different ways that we think a place can address social impact, create social value in terms of inclusion rather than exclusion, quality of everyday life, health and well-being, clean air, and so on. Many of you will have seen this, the rather immodestly titled Most Comprehensive Plan Ever Proposed to Reverse Global Warming. Those are the top 19 things that can be done in urban places in order of significance. Look at number 1, reducing food waste. So how do you design systems in an urban neighborhood, an urban extension, a village, to enable people to reduce their food waste? It's a fantastic agenda for an urban design project. Rooftop solar, electric vehicles, district heating. So there are manuals and guides for almost all of these things today. These are, by the way, are all costed, albeit they're global figures rather than British figures. You think about quality of life surveys. So this is Monocle's, where they rank cities. And these were the top 10 from this year's survey. And I just think, what about if you designed a place that addressed all of those 10 conditions or attributes? So best for health, best for nightlife, best for urban greening, best for mobility, best for conviviality. What a lovely agenda that is for thinking about the places that we're all involved in shaping today. There's lots of wonderful inspiration material. This rather technical diagram now is about how we design places to get that complexity and that granularity. So obviously we start with the constraints. We add in a blueprint where we adopt 20 themes that we research precedents on, which could be things like inside, outside, or courtyard blocks, or the best streets in the world that in this condition. We, over time, working in collaboration with multidisciplinary teams, not just urban designers, but architects, ecologists, engineers, landscape architects, people from the community, we identify key design concepts that will inform the plan, and then they gradually get turned into the yellow circles, which we call the big moves that really determine the way the plan is. And running that as a system gets us to necessarily complex urbanism, by which I mean this. This is a piece of work we did with Schulze Grashoff, formerly of Giel Studio, about 12 years ago, just looking at different conditions that we're seeking in a complex urban place to achieve our objectives. We also, one of our founders at Human Nature was Global Head of Sustainable and Healthy Living for IKEA. And we're trying to bring a bit of IKEA thinking into the way we think about places, which is thinking about our customer, our people, who are we here to serve, this privilege that we have when we're working in a community, to engage them early, to think about their needs, to make the journey as easy as it can be, to make it attractive, to make it democratic design, and to change our own culture throughout the organization to address sustainability in everything that is done in human nature's name. And this next theme is about building in bio-based materials. So this is BEST in Glasgow, our best friends. Stephen Good there on the left. This is in their factory where they produce CLT. They've got a fantastic supply chain, and we're putting together the Natural Buildings Group so that we can build in natural buildings at scale with the best R&D that's available for fire safety, for damp management, for designing efficiently, for system build, for procuring indigenous materials, for scaling up. These are all key to a sustainable built environment. And I think embodied carbon is shooting up the agenda, and absolutely needs to, because embodied carbon is a really key component of any serious whole life, whole place carbon footprint. Some of you will have heard of the Phoenix. This is our flagship project in my hometown in Lewes. This is 8 hectares of brownfield land, been derelict for 20 years. 2 developers have had a go previously. We've increased the density by 60%, eliminated car parking from the streets and concentrated it in a parking area at the end with very low parking numbers. It's mixed use. There are 8 tenures. It has the district's health centre, which we will be building, hotel, cafes, restaurants, studios, workspaces, and so on. It's caught the imagination of some, and I think it's partly to do with, we've used 12 different architects, which brings that kind of richness, I think, of texture and feel, because real places have that diversity in them, and we wanted to borrow from different wonderful architectural brains and sensibilities in shaping this place. It's got to be, this is what it was before. It was the inland port of Lewes, Phoenix Ironworks, and the regeneration of this site is a high priority for the district. There's the model, fittingly built in timber, because it will be built in timber as a project. And you can see the different types of blocks in there, and the way that the urban plan really twists and turns to meet the precise condition, with a river edge of 800 meters, the town centre to the bottom right, the countryside edge to the top left. It's a fantastic condition, albeit very challenging, as many brownfield sites are. Engagement and deliberation was key, in that, Lewes is a very querulous place, let's say, with a lot of people that have strong opinions about everything. It's a very it has a Green and Labour coalition leading it, and many environmental and sustainability organisations that have to be engaged and brought in. We had 4,000 people come to the design festival at the beginning of the project to engage with us and share their ideas. And that now has turned into 900 expressions of interest in living here before we've signed the Section 106. I'm just going to dash through these slides on the aesthetic. These are work, that's Adam Richards, architects. This is Ash Sakala with the detailed consent for Parcel 1. Again, all timber built. This is Alex Ely, Stirling Prize winning architect at May, with the new river bridge. A real attention to detail on materials. This is that Parcel 1 again, with its articulated roofline and different plot widths, but with standard build systems sitting behind it. Very advanced in terms of the overall carbon footprint. Shared courtyard areas, very few, if any, private gardens. So the public realm is where community forms. And so when you come out of your front door, you're immediately able to catch the eye of your neighbor and just smile, say hello. You don't have to have a meeting, but just to inculcate that sense we're all in this together. We need to, this is by Material Cultures, these lovely southwest facing open courtyard blocks. Here we are again. A lot of this is affordable housing. This is our so-called Geel block. borrowed from an existing block in Copenhagen, 5 stories, different tenures, a shared garden, which acts as a mini park for children, laundrette, what's called Giel's Club, which is the co-working space, infant play area, wonderfully social space. Here's the neighborhood center with old buildings being refurbished, the old structures. One is the community canteen, which is affordable food for anyone in the district. On the left there, the old ironworks, the foundry workshops, which were maker spaces. You can see the flood wall in the distance with its belvedere. And this is the focal point of the whole place. Designed, it's quite small, it's quite intimate, which was very deliberate to make it more human and with lots of niches for people to gather whatever the weather and come together as a community. Just more images of the streets. As I said, almost zero car movement in the streets apart from essential deliveries. Old and new, old buildings, old structures next to new buildings, modernism and more vernacular architectures, suds and Danish rain gardens, because we get flooding from runoff, not just from the river. Flint used in the buildings, cycle parking everywhere. These are beautiful buildings, more modernist buildings by AJP. The hotel with its restaurant. These are the timber systems that I was referring to in terms of CLT structure and timber panels, hempcrete, and other bio-based materials. So the natural buildings groups being formed help us with the delivery of this in a cost-effective, replicable way so we can scale it up. I've talked a little bit about the other typologies that we're working on. We have a new settlement for 6,000 homes, which the paper How Shall We Live that I spoke about earlier addresses. Urban extensions. We're developing a rural model at the request of the leader of the local council to demonstrate a new model for that you don't have to choose volume house builder, high embodied carbon, high car dependency, to have access to a new affordable house in the UK. This is a lovely image by White Architects used in the How Shall We Live for a new settlement, a new town effectively made from villages that stitched together into a mosaic overall. Andy Grant Associates, this beautiful green spine and park for How Shall We Live called Wild at Heart. Super program, food production, biodiversity gardens, natural swimming lake, ecological education, the abundant green spreading into the neighborhood. Lots of different kinds of food production here to connect children in particular to where their food comes from. Every village has a village green, which is super program for health and well-being, local community contact, and so on. And so this was the lovely phrase from one of the visitors to the design festival. So what's that got to do with climate? My point is that we have to design and redesign places where people can belong. So we're speaking to them in the most relatable way and engaging people in this conversation about the better future. So it can be meaningful and isn't easily picked off in culture wars. And then we have to act. And when we act, if we're serious about carbon, and I mean that, if we're serious about carbon, then we have to look at the whole place carbon and whole life carbon. Transport is the highest, embodied carbon's high, it's probably second. Food is right up there. So what's your food strategy for the place? And operational carbon and the supplying the renewable heat and power, also obviously critical. But really in the end, how are we going to make that exciting, accessible and desirable for people so that they choose it, they vote for it, they demand it of developers and local authorities and Homes England and governments. And so what we're trying to do as a developer is to push through. The world seems to be inimical to this kind of thing. It's very hard to get the planning that we need for these sorts of projects. They're very bold and innovative and challenge a lot of norms. But that's exactly what we have to do as an industry. We've got to bring forward real, meaningful projects that address this agenda square on. Because if we do, there's an incredible win for us in terms of having an industry that really matters for the future of well-being in this country and on our planet. I'll finish there. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. I see all the applause coming up. It was a truly inspiring talk. I really I really valued those beautiful images. The architecture is beautiful. The landscaping is very beautiful. I wanted to ask you about this role as a campaigning developer. We've got a lot of professionals in the audience. In fact, they're posting their questions, so I'm going to turn to those in a moment. But I guess can anyone in the built environment be a campaigning professional? And and what does that mean in terms of the work that they're doing? What kind of support do they need, or how can they start today being a campaigner, while also working within the system of the built environment with all its challenges?
Yeah, thank you very much, Christine. So this came to me, this notion, when I was 60, and I reflected on my career background and was looking ahead to the twilight years and thinking, what will I do with the rest of my time? And when you think I'd been an actual campaigner in Greenpeace for 7 years, I set up and run a sustainability foundation, and I'd been a consultant for 15 years. And then I thought, what am I going to do next? Because clearly, however much fun that was, and a lot of it was fun, clearly it wasn't as impactful as one might have liked it to be. And so I just felt really it was time to kind of try and weave it all together as a story in place and advance propositions for places in the real world as it is today, however hard, and go, well, this is what we mean. This is the upside of down. This is the joy. This is the beauty. This is the accessibility. I didn't think it would be as hard as it is. I didn't think it would be as hard in planning or to get the kind of investment, but we are breaking through on it on all of those fronts now in a way. So what does it mean to anyone else? It means search your conscience, try and work out what you really believe is important. And if you are a follower of sustainability, I've heard all kinds of consultancies and read all kinds of planning policies that say they are sustainable. Are you? Are you really at the leading edge of breaking through on climate and nature regeneration and social inclusion? Because we don't have the time. This is urgent. We need to move now. We all think government's going to do it for us, and it never does. Not criticizing Labour or anyone else per se. We've got a generation of new towns apparently that we're going to have. Well, this is their agenda. This is their agenda. You see the volume house builders share prices shooting up. Again, I don't mean to pick on them, but are they really dealing with this? Is there any place at scale that you can go to in Britain that you kind of go, yeah, that's doing that? So that's the challenge. We're all campaigners in this.
All creating potential pilot projects too. I'm going to start to give you some of the questions we have. So I have a question from Michelle Morrison, who's Sustainability Officer at Advance Northumberland. Thanks, Jonathan. How hard was it to get people on side to not want to park their cars immediately outside their homes? I love the idea of cars being peripheral, but I imagine that this was problematic.
Well, it wasn't problematic with the majority of engaged people in our town. That was interesting. They were very pro it. So Lewes is a small historic town, slightly overrun by cars. We had a few rather aggressive objections to it from some, and that's understandable. And it happens. This is a fraught agenda. We had all manner of difficulty with county highways. who I feel are still working with an 80s model of highways thinking, but won through in the end. Providing the evidence was difficult because that seems to be the test. On a previous project, one highway engineer said to me, we love your vision, Jonathan, and we love innovation. It's just we need to see that you can prove it before we can let you do it. And I just thought, I think that's the definition of an oxymoron, that you can prove innovation before you do it. But one of the really exciting things here is that it's this 900 people expressing an interest in moving to Phoenix. And when we ask them why, it's really interesting because they go, community is number one. Is they see this place as being a place where there'll be a lively community, a neighborly. Melissa Mean from We Can Make Wonderful Human Beings said at an event last week, we need to make a nation of neighbors. And so community was top, but low-car streets and the idea of children playing in streets and what that does to the feel of a neighborhood was quite high, perhaps second or third. And it just turns out there is this cohort of people in Britain that will do it if we make it easy for them to do so.
Hmm. There's a question from Amy Collins, who's Senior Infrastructure Planner at TCBGC. Is this Phoenix site in a floodplain? And what measures have you taken to address the proximity to the river?
Yeah, nearly all of Central Lewis is in a flood risk area. Like London, actually, like the centre of London, like many places. There was a pretty major flood here in 2000. And since then, the Environment Agency and others have worked hard to increase the capacity of the floodplain. So widening the floodplain, deepening it. In this urban place that we are providing a wall along the river's edge. There is a wall now, we're just increasing its height. But you get two types of flooding here. You get flooding from runoff, so-called pluvial flooding. And that's where the Danish rain gardens, this very system of suds effectively, holds the water until the river level falls, and then gravity feeds it into the river and it goes away. So the gardens are all designed to hold water. So they won't be wet very often. They're typically just nice gardens and play areas. But in the event of a flood, that's what would happen. Based on pioneering work that they've been doing in Copenhagen, which is a much wetter place even than Lewis.
And I'm assuming there's probably no basement flats or anything below ground.
No bedrooms on the ground floor.
Do you have underground car parking in?
No, there was in the previous planning consent. There was an underground concrete car park, the embodied carbon of which would have been planetary in its significance, and that was they had 400 car parking spaces in there. 700 in total for 400 homes. We've got 350 for 700 homes, but 150 of those are for town centre car parking, 50 are for the health centre for people working there. But we do provide a co-mobility hub, which is 50 electric vehicles that you can rent or hire when you need to use a vehicle, plus electric cargo bikes and so on.
There's a question from Marietta Gontikaki, who is a sustainability advisor. Thank you, Jonathan. Which key systemic barriers do you identify to developments like Lewis being deployed at scale? And what systemic changes would enable this direction in the future? So barriers and what changes? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are three really big ones. I think one is that government has to get this agenda. It just has to get the power of place to be transformative across everything it does in its key missions, including economic productivity, by the way. It has to look at, with Homes England, at how we can deal with these issues in placemaking. We can't put it off and hope that we can retrofit these new housing estates that are going to be built everywhere. So one system change is is frankly the sort of rolling our sleeves up and doing a deep dive into our capability for designing and building these places, and then committing resources in government to it. The second is planning authorities, members of committees and planning authorities. I would say probably the weakest component is urbanism rather than sustainability, but is understanding urban design and density and texture and granularity and details in a plan, and the significance of them for quality of life, plus whole place carbon. I would say that's the system change piece. And then the third is with investors, but with investors, many of the really good ones love this agenda, but they don't like risk. And so if they've not seen it before, they think it is in their framing, and I get this, is riskier. So we need a new category of investment, actually. I would call it place enabling investments, where someone needs to come into the middle, because there's lots of tenure specific institutional investment. There's good debt provision. There are some good grants, but what you need is long-term, relatively inexpensive patient capital to stand alongside the developer, master developer, to solve problems financially and in risk management, to then optimize the other investments that are available to making a place. So I think we'll do that at the Phoenix. We're not quite there yet, but once we have, I think we'll have a model that we can use.
There's a question from Siobhan McChrystal, who's head of growth at Choice Housing. You mentioned an unhealthy relationship with Scandinavian design. What do you mean by this? I saw some great examples of Scandinavian design in the Lewis neighborhood design.
Yeah, no, I was trying to be witty and clever. I mean, I'm obsessed with Scandinavian. I'm obsessed with Copenhagen, let me be clear. I think that Copenhagen, in terms of the quality of its public realm, and the quality in particular of its older urbanism, I think some of the newer stuff should look a bit more closely at what worked historically. But I think the combination of being able to put contemporary architecture, which is quite brave and bold, alongside old is beautiful. I think the commitment to redesigning the public realm for people and for cyclists has been astonishing in 40 years, and cumulative, by the way. Hard to start, but once you do, it gets better and better. Courtyard blocks, rain gardens, the shift towards timbering construction, the quality of many of their contemporary architects, in particular people like Effect and Kobe, Henning Larsen, stand out as being great champions of this agenda. And I think we've got a lot to learn about how the city authorities and the investors and landowners and architects and communities have come together to create a shared vision for the future about human-centered design in urbanism and public realm.
There's two questions I want to kind of mash together for you. So Sonali Venkateswaran, who's urban data analyst and researcher at Hawkins Brown, asks if you could give some insight into what kind of stakeholder engagement was done to garner that level of excitement. I think you said 900 people said they wanted to live in the future development. So what did you do to get that level of excitement amongst potential residents? And then also Michelle Morrison from Advanced Northumberland added to that, how did you ensure that your engagement was not just dominated by middle class people? So you mentioned equity as well. So how did you do your engagement? How did you get such excited future forward bookings, I guess you could call them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a way, the engagement is separate from the engagement of the future customers, because the engagement was in a town I live in, which makes it doubly precarious, double jeopardy in a sense. But look, we see engagement, the process of engagement, as an agent of change in itself. The kind of quality of conversations one can have. What's the future of your town? How do you think we should address climate? What can we do about nature here? How should we move around in Lewes in the future? What do you want for your children? These are the kinds of questions if you're designing a place at this scale. This place is a ninth the size of the rest of the town. So it's it's the biggest ever development in the town. So you've got this incredible responsibility. So unfortunately, when we started this one, we were in lockdown, actually. So there was a lot of research done on the town itself, on its architecture and urban form, and on the DNA of the place, its history, and so on. But a lot of work was done in lockdown, and I wouldn't always start like that. I would ideally prefer to start with a citizens' assembly, but we didn't have that luxury here because of the lockdown thing. So what we started with here was what we called a design festival, where we took several of the big sheds, and we invited all our architects and urban designers and ecologists and landscape people down. They all brought an exhibition of their work. And there was this massive weekend festival with talks and workshops and films and models, and the chance for the community to just meet everyone in our team. And it just got us off to a fantastic start because it was on site. It was accessible to anyone and everyone. It was exciting and fun, and there was food and there was music and so on. And it just created a bit of a festival atmosphere. But I think one of the real keys to it, so I've done this stuff in places like Walker Riverside in Newcastle, in much tougher places and communities. And we did a lot of when we were consultants, public involvement in the Olympics and the Olympic legacy. I think the authentic voice is key, because you can't always get people to agree with you, obviously, particularly when you've got a radical agenda like ours. But if they can see that you're super serious and you're not patronizing, you're just kind of, this is who we are, this is what we believe, and this is what we're going to try to do, seemed to me to be the key to it, actually. From that, there's a possibility that trust can be generated.
And the future customers part of that, where did that, number come from, and how did they express that interest?
Well, I think, there've been millions of hits about the Phoenix on social media. I mean, and newspaper articles and so on. And I don't know, I suppose I do a podcast a week, and I think that there was an expression of interest rather as an afterthought on the website. And people just started filling it in. So we thought, this is interesting. So we then started asking them questions. And people just keep filling it in. And it's a bit like hospital waiting list. It's taken 6 years in planning. Half of them are going to be dead by the time we get round to inviting them in. But what we're proposing to do once we're funded and underway is to start running open days in the sheds. So we're going to be making an exhibition of the buildings and how they're made, and there's going to be like nice food from regenerative farms, and we just invite people down from that list and from whoever wants to come. And they get walked around the site. They get to meet the architects again and the builders. And we let people know when we're going to be releasing the first batch, so that they're pre-armed, and then invite the people expressing interest in those particular houses to come on another open day, and meet the architect for that bit. And it goes on. So deepening people's relationship with what's coming. And we're not trying to say to people, oh, you'll come on day one and everything's finished. We're trying to say, actually, we're trying to grow a landscape here. We're going to be making our own soil on site. We've got a tree nursery. We're going to be making buildings from natural materials that will smell good as a construction site. It's a different kind of experience. So we're kind of saying, would you like to get involved in the process of this place evolving, rather than move into the completely finished house and everything else will be finished and it'll all be fine? And that seems to work. People seem to like that idea.
There are, I'm going to try to just, I can only really ask you one more question because we have to get ready for our next session. So, there is a question here about your financial model, whether it's a partnership with house builders, private development investment model, or community led. So I don't know if you can quickly answer that. But there's another question here I want to get to. Someone wants to know if you're going to publish a toolkit. I know education's part of this. I mean, you've got 3 questions here, but the third question is around your food strategy. And how the development will have a sustainable food strategy. How quickly can you answer all 3? There's my question or
But
challenge.
yeah, first one is blended finance, always on a project of this scale. So you've got private equity, you've got debt, you've got forward sales to institutional investors for different components. You take as much off the balance sheet as you can to put into ventures, heat and power, co-mobility, hotel, district health centre, all have different investment profiles. So the magic is to hold it together as one place. The missing bit is the place enabling equity. We're working on that right now. Second one, food.
Sorry, just to clarify what that means, like the affordable housing, essentially.
Oh, well, affordable housing, weirdly, is one of the easiest things to finance, actually, because of the funding that's available for affordable housing. And the food one, I forget what it was, but so we have a relationship with, we've been researching regenerative farms in our catchment, and it being East Sussex, there are quite a lot of them. And so, the cafes and restaurant and what have you here, and there'll be a food co-op that will be created on site that will do bulk buying from the suppliers that we like. We're creating a neighborhood asset management enterprise which will own the community and commercial spaces, so that we get to decide who has the shops and the cafes and so on, so it doesn't just become a cookie cutter place. I've forgotten the third question, forgive me.
Will there be a toolkit? And will you be publishing something so that other local authorities and design teams can learn from the Phoenix?
Yeah, I think on our website already, a lot of the methodologies are introduced, and the circle of impact stuff, the levers, the frameworks. Yeah, I mean, hopefully, if we ever get time, we'll write up some of the stuff. If it's of interest and use to people, we'd be delighted to do that. We do share a lot in these kinds of events and talks, which other developers might say is our IP and we'll keep hold of. But it's a campaign. We want to amplify as much of this stuff. And by the way, there's loads of mistakes and things that we've got wrong and will get wrong. And in the cliche, it's true. Those are as valuable to people as any successes that we might have. But we're still waiting for our Section 106 to be signed, and we've got the final bit of equity to put together to get moving. So we're not there yet. It's hard.
I really appreciate you sharing with us today. There's been lots to learn, and there's lots more to learn as this project goes forward. So I hope you'll check back in and update us frequently on progress in Lewis and at the Phoenix.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a great pleasure.
So that brings this session to a close, but you're going to love our other sessions too. We're going to be back on the hour with It All Starts with Soil. And that's with Dan Matthews, Earth and Geoconsultancy Director at Civic, with Professor Jess Davis, who is Professor of Sustainability at Lancaster University. And that's a session about why soil should shape the way that we plan and build for carbon and biodiversity reasons. So see you in 6 minutes. And thanks so much for joining us at this session.